Hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us again for the first artist webinar with the photographers from the project Versus. It is the last one. I'm a bit sad to say because it has been a great experience. And with me, I have Marina Caneve from Italy, Céline Clanet, French and Corsica in this moment, and Jan Stradtmann, is it okay, Jan? From Germany, which, as we were saying between us right now, is quite telling of the project itself, because Versus brings together 16 photographers from different continents, even, while all interested in connected reflections about the place of the human beings in the environment, the connection with nature, the concept itself on nature, and ecological thought more in general. Marina, Céline, and Jan, they're all works that explore the idea and representation of landscape, which are the ones that have been selected for this project, and are also connected because they're all participated in the project Calamita in Italy. Marina and Jan will talk more about it. So they were all chosen by different teams of Versus, because Versus is composed of 4 different teams of curators, one in Italy, so it's Fonderia 20.9 in Verona, 2 in France, so Galerie L'Aberrante in Cévennes, and Corpo Paco, which is an association I manage with a colleague in Montpellier, and then L'Image à Venir, which is a collective in Bruxelles, in Belgium. So Jan has been invited by Fonderia, Céline by the Galerie L'Aberrante, and Marina by us at Corpo Paco. Some of you maybe followed already some of these meetings, so the idea is really to present the works that have been selected for the project, and then exchange ideas between us. It's really a space for encounter, even if you're at distance, even more than ever in this past year. So we're starting with Marina, and we invited her to present a project which is called, a beautiful title, The Shape of Water Vanishes in Water. So I let her talk about it. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Raquel, for inviting me, and also for having me here with Céline and Jan. I'm particularly happy to be here with them because we shared this experience of Calamita, and I'm happy that Jan is also going to show his work. Well, for the ones that doesn't know, Calamita, it's a collective project that I started together with Giampaolo Arena in 2013. We had this idea to bring artists to the Vajont, which is the site of a catastrophe happened in 1963. And well, we've done it. And in 2016, we published our first book, The Walking Mountain, which also hosts the work of these 2 artists. But also, well, we're planning new things for the project. It would be nice to share them, but of course, if there is time later, maybe. And well, I'm happy also to be here talking about this project, The Shape of Water Vanishes in Water, which was actually quite of a challenge for me. It's a project I started and finished it in 2018, and it was very quick. And it actually comes from a commission which I was asked to work in. I guess it was like something like February 2018, and the book which shows the work was published in September. So that's why I say it was something made like super quick, but which is also really important for me because it was sort of an experiment. I was myself, I was coming from working a lot in the mountains, not only, but I had quite some experience, let's say. And also I was working a lot on topics related to catastrophes. And in that case, I had the chance to look at this completely different landscape, which was the landscape of Cavallino Treporti, a small, like a little town, like in the area which is between the mainland and the Venice Lagoon. And well, I was immediately fascinated by this area for a reason. It's like a sort of a slice of land which is divided in two parts by a main road. And the interesting thing is that the two parts, like these two parts, faces on one side to the Venice Lagoon, as I said, and on the other to the Adriatic Sea. And then I thought that was the thing that I wanted to work on. So on this like double nature of this place. And well, also I thought that this was interesting because it could have talked about the economy of this place. I was thinking how it worked over there with like number of inhabitants, which is 10,000 less than the people that goes there during summer, for instance. So how this thing could work. The interesting thing to work for a little time was also that I had to make choices. Very practically, I was the 9th photographer, which was invited to work there. And to be totally honest, I was also a little bit scared about this project because some of these artists that came before me were sort of my masters, like for instance, Guido Guidi, which was the photographer that followed my thesis when I was at the university. So I was a little bit confused about how to make my work, but that helped me to make very clear choices. And I made some choices, which were, first of all, that I wanted to work with teenagers. And that was because I was searching for this balance in between living in an area which is on one side run by an economy which is touristic, and on the other, which is more rural, let's say. And then I thought also it was really challenging to work with this generation as well. I was interested in the way teenagers build their relationship in between each others. So as you can see in this picture, many times the portraits are not super clean. Let's say the borders of the portraits are not super clean, but there are some things that come inside, like in this case, the ends of another girl. So I was really trying to work with them and also to perform with them the pictures and ask them to do things together with me to emphasize this idea that I had in mind. And well, this is clear, right? I guess. We played a lot, and it was really beautiful actually to work with them. I would be happy to go on to work with teenagers also, because I think they speak about this specific territory, but they are also a way to make this project more universal, which is really important to me. It's not only about this specific place, but it becomes about sort of general way of thinking and a general way of relating to the environment. And well, it's nice because you made this like this presentation with an excerpt from one of the texts that Taco Idebaker wrote for the project, which actually talks about the relationship of these teenagers with the environment, and also ask question, which is which will be our role in the future in relationship to how this environment will change. And well, we spoke a lot with Taco about this project before he wrote the 6 short essays that are inside the book. And one of the things that emerged was that we were thinking what will happen when the sea level will grow, and then these areas will have to change completely the way they you make use of the environment and the landscape. So that's super interesting for me. Also, of course, it's quite, again, the sort of the echo of the catastrophe comes back again, but of course, it's less the center of the project itself. And another thing which composes the project are the landscapes, which are, at the very beginning, I thought I wanted to photograph teenagers and landscapes, but then going there and experiencing the area, I realized that there was something really interesting for me, which was the use that we make of the green. So let's say the green, it is used, and now sometimes it's also confusing to see in lagoons area trees that belongs, like palms, that belongs more to the environment of the beach, or the other way around. So I was really trying to search all these all different uses that are made of the green. And so again, as I said before, the portraits where I tried to make this contamination with like the portrait of the person, and then something which is happening around, and which is bringing in again the idea of the relationship. And well, I gave myself also the freedom to search for metaphors, let's say, although I don't really like the word metaphor, but like images which let us the freedom to imagine something. So for example, the bird, which is not real bird, but it's a plastic bird, and it brings inside small ideas and small reflection on the landscape again, and how it designed it. Not only with the real things, but also with things that we put inside. Well, real, it is real, right? Not only with the natural things. And so again, the grain, the palms, which are in this case, which is like closed inside an environment to protect it, because it doesn't really belong to that specific environment, and in some seasons can't really live there. So it brings back a lot of questions. And the last element of the project are the bird views, which refers to the control, to the idea of control. So in small words, like in little words, there are 4 elements, which are the teenagers, the landscapes with green, and then the open images, and let's say the images from the above. And these images from above refers to the history of the area, where you can find a lot of telemetric towers from the war, which were used to control the lagoon and to protect it. And then I thought I didn't want to photograph the towers itself, but I wanted to use it as an idea, as a strategy to talk about the environment. And I tried to find, which is not really easy to find, higher point of views in the area, which is really quite flat actually. And it's also really interesting because the seaside nearby from there on, let's say on the Adriatic Sea, is not that flat at all. And well, then I used it, and I tried to find out which were the elements, the key elements that are representing the environment. And then there is the lagoon, and then I found out a way to photograph the sea, or the campings, the agriculture, and the military areas, and all these little elements that in sort of urbanistic way of looking at the environment gives me elements to summarize it somehow. So that's more or less the project. And it was published in a publication by APUM in, like I said, in 2018, with these 6 essays from written by Taco. And the thing is that I'm really interested in this idea behind the project, and especially with the teenagers, I'm trying ways to keep on working on this project. And I didn't say anything about the title. I should maybe, but of course it refers, the shape of water vanishes in water refers to this water of the lagoon which melts with the water of the Adriatic seas. So
thank you, Marina.
thank you.
I will stop sharing the screen so we can maybe have a talk. I took lots of notes while you were talking because I'm also rediscovering it through your words. And I have to say that this work in particularly, I think I already told you when we were exchanging a bit, really touched me because I discovered these zones of water, les zones humides, we call them in French, the marshes, when I came to live in Montpellier, because it was something that I was not very familiar with in the different areas of my life I lived in, or I never really discovered, even when I was in Italy. And here in Montpellier, we have this very fragile area where some of them became natural reserves, which are really between the sea and an area of the seaside, which is highly touristic, because we are in a very touristic part of the south of France. And then we have all these étangs, these little lagoons, which are often protected with villages and with an agricultural system which has its all problematic sides. And then the actual protected part of the lagoons. And when I discovered it, it was absolutely amazing, because it was also a way of experiencing nature, or anyway, like walking around, which I didn't know, because for a long time I was in Scotland, so that was like the openness, but in the absolute green, and then the seaside. And there you have the birds I never really seen before, and the plants, which were experiences also in a different way, because we don't have the big trees like in the forest, for instance. But there is a lot of life, but it's completely different. There is a lot of vegetal and animal life, and I absolutely love it. And there is a fragility in this ecosystem. I mean, you were talking about tourism, and having to rethink the way in which we have been using the land, because we have been doing it for a very long time. Also here, especially in this part, with what we call the Mission Racine. Maybe Céline knows a bit more about it. So this project of construction was started in the 70s. And there are all these little villages between the sea and the lagoon, which are going to disappear probably very soon, which have their own economy, their own lifestyle, their own way of life. So I think something resonated also with Montpellier in particular, and with our life and with our way of thinking about these natural reserves, because they're actual natural reserves. And then something that really interested me was the relation with the text, because I discovered your work with the book. So you always have you have all the little parts of the text. I have it here in case someone wanted to have a look. It's a beautiful book. And you have different kinds of paper also for the different kind of images, and the text is in Italian and English, and usually is in this smaller format, which really dialogues with the photos themselves. And here is another one, for instance.
Yeah, that was for a specific reason, because I asked Daco to write a text for this commission. And then we had many exchanges. And then I thought that it was interesting to have this text, which will raise some questions on all the elements which compose the project, but also that can open the questions. So they don't tell you how to look at the pictures, but more they talk about topics that we both are interested in.
Yeah, that can arise, and one of them, one text that I particularly like was on the bird's eye view,
Exactly.
So I find it very telling. It was images that captured a lot of my attention, because I mean, I don't know how long you spent in Cavalli Notreport. How long was this?
It was something like 2 weeks. Not continuative, but something.
Yeah. And I know that you're used to very long-term projects, so I assume this has been a challenge in many ways, also for your practice as an artist. And I saw you there were different kinds of encounters also with the land. So you had this walking around. I mean, in some of the images, you can really tell that you are walking around the camping sites, or walking around the city. You are discovering all this nature that has become a big garden, really, in the city, like the third nature of Jan's work as well. So like it's really anthropized. It's really like made and thought for being almost experienced in a very special way, in a very specific way by the tourists and by the people living in the city. And then you have these images from the high images, which are often related to this idea of control as well, like a vision that really puts the territory in specific parcels, and is an experience that is disembodied. Like we cannot really imagine you there. Like is an experience that is not at all related to the walking and to the being there of the artist. Céline does a lot of walking, so he will tell you more. And I was fascinated to see these very different ways of encountering the land, and in particular these two, really, you strolling around. One can imagine you strolling around this place and discovering, and then these big bird's eye, which are really striking.
Well, I must say that I had a guide which guided me, which was the previous mayor of the area, which obviously knows it very well. So I explained him what I was searching, and that was really beautiful of this work, that he was bringing me around and showing me places that could respond to that idea I had in mind. So that I like that you read it that way.
But I let Jan and Céline intervene and say something if they want to.
Well, I have a question if you want. Oh, but go. Go ahead.
No. You started.
Okay, no. The question would be that I'm interested the way how you work, but you already said it, that it's very much of work about walking around and discovering the area. So I guess you did the same for this project. So you just had a limited space or limited area you follow, or was it more up to you to decide, okay, this is let's say the area I'm focusing on, or was it just clearly?
Well, the area, it's a limited land. That's the interesting.
Already.
It's like sort of 15 kilometers area.
Yeah.
And for 5, so it's really like little. And I had a clear structure in mind, which was my challenge wasn't to photograph the landscape, which I know I could handle as a thing, as a way of photographing, but my challenge was to work with the teenagers. So I kind of made a structure for myself that I had to make some landscape pictures, and then I found out, this entrance of the green, and then, but then the most of the time which I spent was to organize the work with the teenagers.
Okay.
Which actually you can see it's much less about walking around; it's more structured.
Yeah.
There is an intimacy, I think, that is felt. I had a friend today who was looking at your work, and she didn't know it. She didn't read all the text, and she was like, "But are they part of her family? Some of them." And I thought it was very telling, because it was a completely innocent comment, but I think it implied a familiarity, or they are letting themselves go, like in front of your camera. That I perceived as well. So I thought it was very telling, the question, asking if it was part of your family.
It's nice of the teenagers because they are conscious of their aspect, like the way they want to show themselves, but also they trust you. So that's why I really like to work with them.
There were some very also intimate image between them. I mean, there is a lot of element of touch, which I felt was very delicate, like touching hair or embracing, and it's something that teenagers sometimes do, but it's not that easy maybe to be photographed doing it in such a way where you let yourself go, and so there was a real beauty in it.
Thank you.
Yeah, how many time did you spend with them?
Well, let's say it was in total sort of in between 2 and 3 weeks, which I was there. But you know, some of them I spent, like, I met few times, and some it was just one time. So it's really like also because some are locals and some are tourists. So the tourists were just there, like, pop.
Well done.
Grazie.
Yes.
And also the book. I didn't see the book for real, but I know how much perfection you like to put on the book, and I can recognize it when Raquel is showing it. I can recognize your touch. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, there are some. She was talking about these metaphors, or maybe we could talk, I don't know, resonances, or like encounters, like visual encounters or ideas. Like this is one I really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful.
A
little more obvious than what I would normally do, but
but I yes, and then yeah. We were talking about the walking, and I can imagine, you know, the walking around and looking down, and I really rediscovered walking thanks to my kids. I mean, the walking had this aspect of being émerveillement. We say in French, how do you say, like meraviglia, like a wonder. Yes, English. Sorry, between all these languages that I speak, and none of them well anymore, like between this wonder. And it's something that is really related for me to walking. And for a long time, I lost it because I was always going somewhere. Like I was not just being in a space. And with my kids, I rediscovered it. Like we can never arrive anywhere because there are little ants that are on the ground, and there is that leaf, and there is that flower, and it's something that I perceive in many of the works of the photographers who have been participating in this project in general, but this really, this attention, this care of being a subject in the space and looking, and the camera allows you to do that, and I think it's beautiful. Okay, I let Céline maybe talking a bit. I mean, as we are in the theme of a kind of embodied vision of being in the space and walking, I think is great to pass to your work to see more about that.
Thank you.
No. Wait. Voilà.
Yeah, les chapieux.
Yes.
Chapieux. So in English, because we're speaking English, it's Chapieux, Geography of a Secret. And it's just as Marina was saying, it was also a mission, an assignment from a foundation based in the Alps, a cultural foundation. And it also finished as a book at Actes Sud Édition. So it's a bit of an old project. It's like 7 or 8 years old, I think. And like Marina, it took me a long time. It didn't take me 3 weeks. I admire you, my dear. It took me over a year to achieve. This valley, the Chapieux is the name of a valley located in the Alps. And the specificity of it is that it's unreachable in wintertime, because it's a valley that's like a V-shaped valley, very, very, very narrow. And you get avalanches and snow slides in wintertime. So for centuries, mountain farmers have been going there with the cows, the goats, the sheep, from, let's say, spring to autumn, and then they go to another valley with their animals. So it's been going on for a long time. And so this foundation wanted me to make pictures of that Chapieux Valley because of it. It's a very wild area in the French Alps, where you get a lot of valleys that are not so wild. I mean, you have ski resorts, you have dams, you have all sorts of human installations, but in that one, it's impossible. So that wintertime dangerousness, specificity makes it protected in a way. It protects itself. So it was a documentary project. So I really wanted to see everyone that were using the valley. So I started with the mountain farmers. So I spent a lot of time with them. I was working with them for many days without making pictures because I was living for like 2 weeks with them. We didn't have any connection. It's really wild there. So the way for making pictures was to work with them, actually. So this is one of them, and you can maybe show the other ones. Yes. So they live there temporarily. They just live there several months a year. But it's actually that they've been doing the same since they're born. So it's pretty faithful to what they do every year. So it's a very rough life. And they're making mountain work, which means that they walk with the cows. They change them. They change the pastures every day, sometimes twice a day. And you can imagine a herd of 200 cows being moved every day, twice a day, and being milked and everything up in the mountains. So it's a super harsh work. And they also manage the land, the grass, everything. So they were there. That was really fascinating to see their relationship with nature. But they have, by the way, a very weird way of seeing, because we're talking about wilderness. They have their own way of seeing wilderness. Like, for instance, when they see the pastures everywhere in the mountain, they say that it's neat and it's clean because it's grass and pasture. And they say we clean the mountain. They see trees and bushes as a mess, as something useless to them. So it's always interesting to talk about it with them. They have a very specific vision of what is the mountain and what is wilderness, even if it's a sustainable way of using it. So I followed also the hunters, as you're showing. I follow the farmers, the hunters, and the climbers. So to me, that those three kind of population were the most interesting, because they have I would say, an intense relationship with the land, and they use it in a very, very different way. So, but hunters, even if I'm not a pro hunting, that was a very important part of the valley. So they hunt wild goat, they hunt marmotte, prairie dogs, small. This is shocking everyone, but they do kill it, and it's something totally normal to them. So, but yeah, as you can see, I spent a lot of time with the herds. Yeah, and this kind of picture shows precisely the harshness of that valley. And this is, I think, the end of August and beginning of September. And you can see that it's already snowing. It's a mild mountain, high mountain site. I think the highest point is almost 4,000 meters high. It's a very high valley. And so this shows the harshness and the threat that this mountain represent. And so also on the top, it's a little bit like we started at the bottom and now we're going up. And so this is at the summit on the glacier. And this is cross skiing. There's no ski resort or anything, but it was important also to show that part of the valley, this wilderness and roughness also. These people come from most of them are not tourists. They come from the villages around. So it's a very local thing. So totally different. So thanks for showing it, Raquel. It's really cool.
I'm very glad.
So this is ground noise, and it's my ongoing project right now. It's also started as an assignment. So it's been my COVID work, because it's a work I started just after the pandemic, and I'm still doing it right now. So the assignment is over, but I'm still carrying on because I really loved doing that work. So to sum it up, it's assignment from the Saclay territory, and probably you've never heard of it, but the Saclay territory is a little bit like a Silicon Valley, I would say, the French Silicon Valley. It's a small territory. No, it's a big, not small. It's at southwest of Paris, and it's some cities, and it's mostly occupied by research centers, schools, campus, and like this is where you get the Center for Atomic Studies. This is where you get a lot of structure from the CNRS, which is the Center for the National Research Center, so to say, to sum it up. And so it was an open assignment, like what can you do about that territory? So I was thinking that the interesting thing would be to work on the wild areas of this territory, which are forests mostly, zone humide, as you said, Raquel, ponds, rivers, and to mix it with science, because there are so many research centers on that territory. So I was very lucky to be able to work with the CNRS and the INRAE, which is the, in English, National Institute for Agronomic Research. And so what I did is I did pictures in the forest and in the rivers. And while I was making those pictures, I picked up samples in the nature, like insects, organic samples mostly. And then I went to those research centers, mostly with the INRAE, that I'm still collaborating with nowadays. And so we used their scanning electronic microscope to look at the samples that I did picked up. And so it shows a sort of infra topography, I would say, because it only shows the surface of things, right? Just exactly as I do as a photographer. You know, if I go in the forest, I show the topography of that forest. And this is a beetle, back of the head of a beetle, a small beetle. And those are, I don't know in English, micro-rayures, Raquel, help me.
No, I don't. Little scratches, maybe.
Yeah, we'd say
microscopic
micro scratches of the back of the beetle, so it's very, very small. It's very, very small, but to me, it's so moving actually, because you can read how the beetle is living actually, always going upside down, and exactly, Marina, you do the beetle very well. So that was so interesting, and I started to come back more and more with different kind of samples, like for instance, this is not a sample, but this is done. But for instance, that one, this is an insect that's trapped in a spider net. And so they were so happy when I came with all that samples, because the guy that was working only with bacteria. So when I was bringing the ant or the beetle or the spider, it was like, wow, so cool. So we would spend hours and hours watching them. And it's very, very time consuming. Like for this kind of picture, it took like 3 hours to make, because it's the scanning electron is not an optic system. It's a system with electrons. So it doesn't see, it just sends electron on the sample. It's a bit like a bat. You know, the bats, they send infrared, and the information comes back, and this is how they see. And it's exactly the same system. So the microscope doesn't see, but sends electrons and receive information and analyzes it. So it looks very photographic, but it's actually not at all an optical photography. It's a blind photography. It's in the dark. There's no air, no oxygen, and it's only work with very, very small samples. But still, I like the fact that it's pretty homogeneous with my other pictures that I shoot in the forest. This is why it's all shot in black and white. I really wanted to melt the two visions, the visible and the invisible visions, and to look how it communicates. This is a spider egg.
Okay, and I was going back. So these are the area where you took the samples.
Yes,
I mean, they're very close views.
It's it's not so close actually. It's pretty much.
Oui, yes, it's not, but it's not from the distance. I mean, are you walking around taking the samples?
Yes,
and,
most of the time it's not necessarily like the spider that I took in that. In that area, but it's usually not far from it. And also the thing is, you didn't have to walk a lot to find things. I mean, you just have to spend like some minutes in a place, sit down and watch. And then suddenly you will see the things moving, and you will see this little spider egg and this little spider net and this ant. And so you don't need to walk a lot for that. But this is what's fascinating, actually. It's like on 1 centimeter in the forest, you get 1,000 worlds, which is totally amazing.
Yeah, it resonates a lot with the work of Marine, which you probably know. And in one or the other meetings we had online, she's presenting her new work, The Garden of Hannibal. Le Jardin d'Hannibal. So it's about this, again, this protected garden, and she worked as well with scientists, and she has this closer, very attentive view on details, and she works with there is a chromatic play as well, like the different parts is in the mountains, the different parts, the different types of things she's photographing are also related with the times of the day. But there is this idea, okay, I get a closer view. I stop for a moment to look at something like this that usually we don't pay much more attention to. And then there is an entire world, an entire chaos of organisms of different kinds that appears to our eyes and to the camera. So and I was thinking about her work. Also, just going through this, and can I stop sharing? Is it okay? Because you were talking about hunters, and the work which was selected for the project Versus is Le Soleil des Loups, the wolf's son, I would say is the translation in English, and she followed these brothers from childhood up to teenage years. So actually, like there are quite a bit of projects which are connected with youth and with a reflection on the future, which I also thought was quite interesting, because it was again not a choice. It's just emerged with the different selections, and we were talking a bit about hunting during the encounter with her, and how these kids had a very peculiar experience of the landscape they inhabited, and how they knew it. They were trackers. I mean, they were practicing the tracking kind of hunting, and how they knew it very well. And they really are relation to it, even if we usually think of hunting, clearly with all the problems they are. I mean, she was saying herself, I'm not pro-hunting, but she discovered an entire different ways of dwelling in a natural space. And I was reading your text, the amphitheatre, I think we say like that in English, and you were saying two things. I mean, it was a very beautiful text, a presentation of your work, but you were saying two things that caught my mind, and one was season, sky, and every hour of the day continuously shape a different surface. So how this landscape, which seems immutable, is really metamorphic and is in time and in changes constantly. And the other one was each meter worked, make it new. And I could really see you walking in this space. And I've been rereading a lot recently, a British anthropologist called Tim Ingold. I don't know, well, I think you know him. And I mean, he teaches at the university where I did all my studies in Scotland. So it was not my teacher, and I didn't know it that well at the time, even if I knew of him, obviously, because he's a big personality. And he's coming out, his thought resonates with so much of the things we have been saying these past weeks. And with your work and Marina's work and Jan's in particular. And there is one of the books I was rereading, which is The Perception of the Environment. And are the essays on dwelling and skill and how we are part of the environment we live in. And I was really thinking about these different kinds of people that you followed, and how they dwell, as you say, in the environment instead of just occupying it, instead of just considering it as something, you know, that we look from a distance and we just have to be according to our maps and charts, but we are in it. And we follow our paths and we follow tracks. You're talking about lines as well, and how they make their own lines. But,
just like Ingold.
And I thought it was very beautiful, because we mentioned already this embodied vision of the walker and of the discovery with Marina's work. And I thought all your projects reflect a bit on this line and this idea of a dwelling that goes within the flux of the environment, being in the environment and not just building on it, or the problem we have when we just build on it and pass after to Jan's work. But it resonated a lot, and I thought it was beautiful. And then your new project is another way of approaching. I mean, I'm continuing on the same research, really on how we represent the landscape, not just as a vision from the distance. How can we show in an image this being in it, and this collaboration with all this organism? You're just part of it as the photographer. So but Ingold was coming up again and again and again while I was looking at all your work. So I just spent a week rereading him.
He's wonderful. I love him.
But I let Jan and Marina also say something without taking up all the time.
Or not.
Or not.
I want to say something. I just want to say that I'm always impressed how you can manage like situations which are not so I mean, totally uncommon, going with these guys and staying with them and working with them, or going to Russia, or, you know, this kind of things. Of course, no, but I know it from my side as a female photographer, it's not so obvious to be able to enter in such situation, also to be taken seriously. And I know that this is something for you. And well, that's always really I'm always really surprised that you can do that.
Well, I'm having fun doing it.
Yeah.
So that helps. But no, yeah, of course, I understand what you say. Yes, it's not always easy, but a male photographer would have his own difficulties. To be taken seriously is probably the most difficult part. Like, you're accepted because in a way you're amusing.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh, she's the foreign artist and what does she want? But to be taken seriously is another story. So it takes time. And this is why we go back to what I was telling you at the beginning. 3 weeks to me to make pictures of people seems crazy to me, because with the farming guys, I was there day and night. I was sleeping with them in the same sort of old farm, you know. But with your teenagers, you probably didn't spend 24 hours a day with them.
No.
So to me, when you shoot people, when you make pictures of people, it's the most time-consuming thing, because you spend so much time not making pictures to be accepted and to look at them, just look at them and know what's possible to do or not. So yeah, it's time to me. It takes so much time to shoot people. It's
and these seem very masculine communities. I mean, we know that with hunting usually is very it's a male community, but also with the farming and so I mean it's also quite, as Marina was saying, it's like your presence as a female photographer is even, I don't know if I could say braver, but
they were happy.
Yes.
They were happy to have, because the guys I'm talking about were 3 brothers, and they didn't have a wife, children. They just living like monks of the mountain, I would say. So they were so happy to have the female entertainment, and I was working with them for free. So it was super cool for them.
And I sort of, I mean, I loved how you portray them, because there are some images like the one when we are eating, and I come from the art history background originally, and it was looking at the painting from the 17th century, like from the Flamands or the he had that feeling, and it's not that easy to portray like that, but there is really a look I felt, and there is a care as well, like the care that the painter can give, that I think is perceivable in these images. And I was like, I'm just like looking at a painting. It was incredible. And you could not believe almost that, you know, they were not like fixed there posing for you for like a week.
Yeah, they have to forget your presence at some point.
Yeah.
They didn't even look. I was eating breakfast with them. It's the picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so at some point I just took my camera and made the picture, but they just kept eating and they didn't really care, because, you know, I was with them for many days before that picture. So, but they were amused most of the time. Like, oh, why are you taking pictures of us? It's not interesting. And they were laughing. And so.
But that makes, maybe, I'm not sure, but I think it makes the difference between a reportage and a work like that.
Yeah, because I do a lot of reportage, and it's a totally different way of making pictures. It's a way of making pictures, and also the result is very different. It cannot be the same, and it's also very different if you work on your own, or if you work with, as you said, with the mayor was with you, it's totally different. If you need someone to speak the language for you, it's totally different. So you have to adapt to the situation and make the most of it, I think. So yeah, you make a very different picture when you're on your own. That's for sure. It's not the same.
That's something I can clearly see in both of your projects, the way how you, you know, be present in a situation, but at the same time, you, because of your, let's say, long-term follow-up and the way how you know, get together with the person, they forget about you also in your work, Marina. And that's something I really appreciate. And but this, in my opinion, really very much has to do with the personality of the photographer behind that project. And that's, if I look at pictures, for me, they tell a lot about the person behind the camera and how the person is fascinated about, for your example, about photographing adolescent kids or teenagers, and in your case, you know, hunters, and this kind of interest also to come into a small, let's say, microcosm of hunting, for example, of, you know, taking care of cows in a situation where you normally would not live your life. But that's something what photography directs you, or can open up a field of interest, and is if this is the case, of course, all of this you can find in the pictures, and that's something I completely can see in both of your work, this kind of really intimate interest in a topic and in the person and in the landscape, let's say, as well. It's a fascination, but also an incredible presentation of the subject. Yeah.
But I think part of it, this sensibility maybe comes also from the fact that there is an interest in the community as well as in the landscape and the land that forms them. I mean, they form the land and the land forms them. So when your research and your look goes within this process, that is really an interaction. So it's not just the people, it's not just the land. I think that there is an encounter that can be a bit deeper even with the community itself, because I'm thinking about the teenagers who are tourists or not in this very peculiar little village in Italy, but I'm also thinking about all the hunters or the farmers who are living in such an extreme condition in this space. Their life is so deeply connected with where they live. So it's, I think a certain proximity or comes also from an interest in all of it, because it is an ecology is a very specific interaction. So I let you, Jan, maybe speak a bit about the work. Marina already introduced a bit Calamita. You want to say something else, Marina, about how the photographers were invited maybe to do the project? I mean, how did Jan get involved in it?
Well, that was actually totally mine and Gianpaolo's choice.
Okay.
So at the very beginning, we had ideas and we started like slowly, you know, to invite people from Italy. And then we realized that as it was for us, people were really fascinated by this story. And so we tried like a bit shyly to invite first foreign artists, and then we realized that it worked basically. So we thought to invite artists that we liked basically, and that would have probably worked on some specific sides of this story, which is so complex that it can hold thousands of specific small visions. So that was the way we arranged it. And well, I said in 2016 we published this book, The Walking Mountain, and which is a sort of omnicomprehensive view on the project. And the idea now is to develop a few projects, including Jan and Céline. And well, we will be in Arles to discuss the project, so that's more or less it.
That's very good to know. But I can ask why you really started working on this project. Are you from the area, or I mean, how did you get interested in this specific incident? And it has a huge impact in Italian history, obviously. But how did it begin?
Yeah, well, I was at the beginning of my career, and my first project was made in France, and it was my thesis. And then I decided to go back to Italy, and I thought that this story was really interesting because actually not a lot of artists have been working on it. There are some theater pieces or movies, a lot of books, but not really artworks, even though there is an art center around there, which was trying to kind of avoid to talk again and again about the catastrophe. Then I thought that it was really interesting. Also, I am myself from the area, not that specific area, but like not so far. And of course, I was kind of influenced by stories that my parents were telling me about when it happened. In general, I'm curious to listen to people and to listen to things, stories or things from the past, or these kind of things. So I had this thing in the back of my mind, but and then I thought that it was like a fantastic place where to build sort of ongoing workshop for artists. And then I proposed it to Giampaolo Arena, and together we built it. So that's more or less how it came.
Okay, well, let's see how Jan saw it all. Because there are, as you said, many different ways, many different visions, and many different encounters with the story at the place.
I can just also the historical. There's a small, of course, the history of the catastrophe. Actually, it started, or let's say the catastrophe itself has happened 1963. And I just keep on talking, Marina. I think that's so. What was happened in 1963 was the part of the mountain called Mont Toc was slipping away into the reservoir of the Vaillant Dam, and that created a huge, massive wave. And this wave swept over the dam, and the dam itself, it's still there. It did not collapse. And this move this over here, and this created a huge wave, and this wave was destroying several villages and towns in between minutes, and nearly 2,000 people left their lives. And I think for me, the first time I got in contact with the topic and with the historical fact of Vaillant was when you and Giampaolo asked me to, if I can imagine to contribute a body of work. And then I realized that once I was there that in the Italian history, it's a huge part of the Italian history. And so for me, it's interesting to work on historical topics, first of all, and second, something what I also finds always my interest is to work on, let's say, limited projects in terms of space, something what you were also said before, the project you did with the teenagers. It's geographically limited, and this for me helps me to start or to create a starting point, and also to find, okay, this is something else. And also what you presented, Céline, this kind of microcosm at the end, it's it's very much interesting that, for example, the entire last year, we all experienced a kind of limitation, and this limitation, in a way, to use creatively, from my side, I can say it always pushes things much forward. So that was something I experienced when I came back, or when I entered for the first time the area, and so that's the historical background. I just need to also go to see what picture is in the presentation. This one. Okay. So I started actually to take pictures, and the way how I work is very much that I go around in the area, and in this case, for example, I was driving a lot around in the area just to connect myself and to see the distance and to see the entire dimension of the area. So this picture was one of my earliest pictures, and it's taken on the actual landslide of the Mont Choc. So originally, this picture would not have been possible then if the mountain was not falling into the reservoir. So I tried to also include myself looking at the dam. So you see at the really end, you see the dam, and you also see part of my car, and in the mirror, you see me looking at it. And this kind of interaction from that point on started that I wanted to create a specific mood, which I experienced on a very subjective level, but also telling the story in this way. Part of my work is also that I include some very metaphoric elements. For example, specifically in this picture, it's a part of a tree, and this tree started to grow on the landslide itself directly after the catastrophe. And nature fascinates me exactly on this point, that nature is completely without any, let's say, excuse. If there's anything happen, it completely, you know, the next year you have some small seeds starting to take over the place. And because the catastrophe is already nearly 50, 60 years ago, these trees are now used for forestry. So there's another generation already cutting down the trees, using them for forestry, and giving another completely different meaning. So my idea was also to use that kind of meaning in putting in a blue foil as a kind of photographic foil over the left of the cutting, to just create the idea of a flooding of something which can use also as a metaphoric element. And yeah. I also included pictures of the entire dam system, because the Vaillant Dam itself is part of a huge system. So you have to imagine that normally or sometimes you have one power station at the end of the dam. In the Vaillant area is different, because you have several dams are connected with pipes, and then there's one huge or main power station. And this, for example, this picture is taken from a different reservoir, and it shows an empty reservoir, because from time to time they need to empty the reservoir to do maintenance on the dam itself, on the structure. And something I really like in this picture in particular is the very monochrome situation of the architecture, which is obviously not in use anymore, and also the trees. These trees are also flooded. If the reservoir is filled up, they are completely underwater.
I just wanted to say that when I saw this picture, I thought like it looked completely unreal. Like it looks like coming from a fairy tale. It's there is a bit this element anyway in your work with the play of light and of chromatism, but I found, yes, it's that one in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way to, for me, it's sometimes the way just to limit it, also to use a limitation as well in the visual language. And in this picture, for example, I just simply set up my car and just to put some light on it. It's very simple actually. But something what's shown here is the backdrop of the dam, which was used for the movie, which is I think filmed in 2001, and the movie focuses on the Vajont Dam catastrophe. And after filming the company, they just left the backdrop of the dam, which is the model of the dam. They left it to the community of Vajont, and Vajont itself was built for the survivors of the Vajont Dam catastrophe. So for me, it's interesting how we as a society deal with specific memories of, let's say, catastrophes as well, and how we create a kind of entrance door. But at the same time, I found it quite strange to leave this backdrop, which is now placed more or less in front of the cemetery in Vajont. So everyone who's going to the cemetery has to pass by this level of also use this level of use for let's say also for pleasure, because it's a movie, and this movie is also made for pleasure. So I found it quite strange, and these elements I'm still looking for. If I do projects, I'm trying to find these elements as symbols for the way how we deal with the past, and how we use memory, how we deal with memory. With elements of memory. This one is more or less the same. It's a jacket. It's a leather jacket, and it's still obviously not touched since the catastrophe was happened, because the leather itself is completely strong. It's hardened, so you can actually take it from the hook where it was hanging in the house in the entrance door, and you can hold it like this, so it keeps the position, and it's not falling like it would normally do, like a leather, like a jacket would normally do. So for me, it also freezes the time, and it becomes an object just because it's still hanging there, maybe since 1963, or maybe it's just forgotten by someone. But for me, it's the symbol of time, and how can time be captured in with photography. Part of my research, let's say, I traveled several times to the Vajont area, was to reconstruct something what people had to discover directly after the catastrophe. And this is a small road which is now closed because there's a new tunnel connecting the area. But this road, in my opinion, still you can see the entire pressure of the mountain and of the valley. So it goes inside the valley, through the valley, and because it's a very, let's say, dangerous situation to travel along this road, you can also always feel the pressure of the mountain, of the entire situation as such. And I was trying to rediscover what people must have felt when they traveled from the site of the catastrophe to the new town of Vajont, which is about 40 kilometers of 40 kilometers of driving. And we always had to went through this really small, narrow area. And in this area, you can absolutely feel the pressure of the mountain. So yeah, that's also the same with this picture in the the silhouette in the back is the Mont Toc, and the silhouette in the front is part of Erto Castle, and this village was one of the villages hit by the wave. So my idea was to use photography in the way to create again the pressure which is felt by people, and people who are entering the area always have the feeling of a very strong let's say mountain scenery, and this is something I just wanted to repeat in a very symbolic way.
When I see in your work, the word storytelling comes quite a lot to mind, because we discussed the different photographic approach, and Céline was talking about documentary, and with your work, you there are all these symbols and metaphors, and every image within the construction, the color and the atmosphere it creates really thinks about this temporality as well in the space. I have a last one here really from your project, and this from an installation which was done in Fonderia 20.9 in Verona, an installation of Calamità. So you collected objects as well?
Yeah, the work consists of landscapes, portraits, and some elements I collected. And these elements I just found them interesting. And sometimes it's, of course, something you can put a lot of meaning in just a simple stone. And this stone obviously is painted blue, or I don't know why it was blue. Whatever that kind of meaning you put into something, it's always something what interests me, especially how I can transform it with photography. Because as you said before, this kind of fascination, what you can have with small details and spiders and all these things, that's something what I feel when I look at them. And the question is, how can I transform this into something that could be interesting for someone else? And that kind of playful scientific element which I just add is something which I'm also, let's say, questioning. What could be the interest about something which is probably only interesting for, let's say, for me as a photographer, and how does it tell anything about the entire, let's say, situation, and what kind of additional information gives it about the area, about the project, about the historical fact. So it's always a thin line between something you see, obviously a small stone, and something you can put in as a meaning. And that's I really like to play with these things. Yeah.
And I have a last image of the installation at Fonderia with the general idea. So there are some images, like it's a collective project. So as we said, lots of different looks. And I wish I was there, obviously, as I usually wish I was there at Fonderia's exhibitions, but I haven't been yet. I'll stop sharing and just ask very, very quickly, make just 1 or 2 points very quickly before letting Céline and Marina say something, because time runs away. One thing that really fascinates me in general about the project Calamità and the question of Vajont is the one of infrastructure and the relation of infrastructure with the community and with the landscape. And I was going back to Tim Ingold again, as I said, I was reading him a lot, especially for this talk today. And he was talking about the idea of hard surfacing, which I thought it was incredible. So I have some notes here, because otherwise I will never remember it all. But he was talking about hard surfacing. I don't know if you read this about him, about this idea of engineering a surface which is totally homogeneous, ready to be built upon, as we do usually with infrastructure, and is inert, as you say, like it doesn't interact at all. So you prepare it to build upon, to occupy it, to exploit it, and that's how we often tend to think about the land. And then it is often a characteristic of this built environment. And then he says, and I'm reading it because I thought he was telling so much about this project in general. He said that hard surfacing cannot withstand the elemental forces of the sky and the earth that erode it from above and subvert it from below. Eventually cracks and crumbles. And as it does so, as the substances beneath are exposed again to the light, moisture, and to the currents of the air, the earth once more bursts into life, overwhelming any human attempts to cover it up. So he's really talking about this attempt of creating a surface, of covering, and how it's impossible somehow. And I felt it was very, very telling, and in particular about this incident. But I let you, Céline and Marina, say something as well.
Marina is the best to speak about the project.
Well, yeah, I said already many things about Calamita, and of course, I mean, I'm so much involved that it's really hard to say anything if not that I really love the project. But also, I love the fact that Jan places himself as someone which goes there, and it doesn't you don't hide your presence at all, which I find extremely fascinating in this project, in this third nature that you build yourself. And I think that that's the point of the work.
Yeah, you mean to just really physically going there and making this visible also for the audience, or no, sorry.
Yeah, this is something which I think it is. I think for all the works, but in your work itself, you play with the environment a lot.
Yes, that's true. Okay, no, I have it. Yeah.
Like making new nature, which is obviously, of course, something which is displaced in time, but also is kind of displaced in the meaning of things, which I find extremely fascinating. Also, like the objects, for instance, they are not necessarily objects that had to do with the catastrophe, but that you found in your journey in the area. And I liked a lot at the beginning when you spoke about the fact that you felt that it is a little environment, like a smaller place. Because the funny thing for me is that for me, which I know it very well, it feels enormous, which is super strange. And I liked a lot this perception that maybe it's the same that I had myself when I went to Cavallino Traporti. I felt that it was little, but actually maybe it's not. And it's about the distance that as a photographer you find, and the limits that you allow to yourself when you have to go somewhere.
Well, it is at the end. You're right. It is a small area, and no, you're right. It is big. If you look at the map, of course, it's if you see the entire, something you also said about the entire infrastructure, it's huge, it's massive, and of course, this is something. I think a project like this comes to a limit. Each position, all of us, Céline works, your works. If you include every position, and then you make it, of course, much more wider and much more interesting, let's say, to someone who's interested by looking at photographs, but at the same time to get something, to get an information about a historical fact, but also about how it looks today, and how you can transform something you see today into something which is at the same time a document. Because if you look at the work we did for Calamita in, let's say, 20 years, there's another level on top of it. And this level is something also very much interesting for me to document, but also to use photography as a tool to create and to propose something in a way. And looking behind an infrastructure is always interesting and gives a kind of, let's say, information how we as a society work. And for example, if you really think about the catastrophe of Vaillant, that actually some warnings from geologists and other people from the area, they said before, look, if you build this dam, this could be happen sooner or later. And these kind of warnings, of course, they have been ignored. And this is a historical fact. But at the same time, this catastrophe could also be a metaphor for something, how we use the nature at this moment, right now, for us, let's say simply to produce energy, to turn on the light, which I need to do because it's getting dark here anyway. But this kind of questions we have to deal with these kind of questions. And something what I found interesting in the Calamita project is that the project itself, with different positions, with different photography positions, can be, I would not say it can give an answer, but it can just transform to see, look, this is something this could be happen. And of course, the idea to use, let's say, water as a renewable energy, as an idea as such, is something, of course, it's fantastic, but still, as you see, what also could be happen is we have to deal with the consequences. And this, let's say, man-made catastrophe is also, of course, something we need to take in advance, that everything we do has an effect on the other generation. And we are the other generation right now to just document it, to photograph it, but also to learn maybe how can we make things better? How can we deal in a different way with our situation right now? So that's something what I think is a super interesting topic to use Bayonne, or not to use, but to take Bayonne as an example for lots of our things.
And this what I found very fascinating is really much a project about the present or even the future.
Well,
right.
And not simply is not an historical investigation. Clearly, there is all the history and this temporality, but it's a continuous temporality.
Yeah.
It's not about the event fixed in the past. It could not, because already the landscape the landscape itself carries all the traces of time, but brings along with it in a process. So the moment in which we look at history in the landscape, it cannot be fixed. And then there are the communities, and then there are all these creative aspects of the story you tell, in particular, Jan, that is beautiful. I was saying, like, this kind of, I was saying, for me, it was this almost fairy tale character that is given to every picture, and is really part of how you look at things. I mean, this is your way of seeing it. But and it's not just the present, even, because the moment in which we are in the present, we are already going to the future. And then we are going back to the teenagers of Marina, for example. I know you worked also with some teenagers with a project, Jan, called Singularity. So, I mean, how this younger generation, I mean, can deal with it, with the memories and with what can be done, what has been done. And the areas are all very peculiar areas that you investigated, because one is a very almost unreachable one for Céline. So it's and then there is an area that is going to change inevitably for the in Cavallino Treporti with the water rising, and then there is Vaillant. So I think there are lots of points in common for reflection, even beyond Calamita, which I found very, very fascinating. The time has passed very quickly, for me at least, because it was such a pleasure. I'm just gonna say like 2 words about what's happening next, because this is the last one of our events online. So it's been a month of like online streamings and meetings. So this is the last. And finally, we are getting also to the live events, which we are very looking forward after all these months of museums and galleries with being closed. And the first one will happen at Fonderia. which was also the occasion for us to meet you all because they hosted Calamita. They organized an exhibition called Ecosofia. So it's from the Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, and is really connected with this idea of deep ecology and this approach to an ecological gesture, so the system of relations. That's how we can see the world and our way of connecting with it. And they're all ideas that started in the 60s. So Arne Næss created this word Ecosofia, and they are using it for an exhibition organized in relation with the Museum of Natural History in Verona, and in particular with the Department of Botanics. So we are thinking about our relationship with plants, our need to catalog them, taking them, and storing them, and more in general about also relations beyond the one that is just fully anthropocentric or based on our own vision of things. So first event live in person on the 8th of May, so this week in Verona, and they will also be streaming and showing the projection of all your works with the projection of Versus. So I want to say that because I'm very excited. I think it's a great project. And also is an occasion to meet in person for whoever is there. And I would like to thank you all for participating in the project in the first, and then for agreeing to have this chat this evening. It was a great pleasure because it's always a great way to discover more, to exchange, and we hope this can be continued somehow. So thank you, Marina, Céline, and Jan, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.